So the unit we're starting today is communicate and work in the health industry. Always refer to the units to the last 3 or 4 numbers, because most of the units starts with CHC, which is also your qualification will be CHC, which is really just the healthcare units that are all referred to like that. So if I say, have you done COM5 or 00005, then that's the unit I refer to sometimes. So it also helps you because on the unit, there is no, it's hard to keep track of, to keep the 2 units next to each other, and your eye have to get used to recognizing the numbers. It might be helpful to write on this unit week 1, because this is week 1. And as you go through, there is 12 units in total. One of them is the first aid, and that way you'll know, when to submit the unit. And so on the learner guide and on the unit themselves, just put a 1 on both on the corner, then you'll know these 2 go together. And then next week when we'll finish this, and the week following we get the second one, you do 2 and 2, and then you know these 2 go together. Because if you have them in front of you, they all look the same, because they all just, and sometimes it takes a while for us to get used to looking at things differently. So this communicating in the health industry is a nice little easy unit. Yeah, and we will probably get through it quite quickly today. I can just get on the right page. Yeah, this is a nice one. So I've just got a little video as an introduction.
I'm passionate about compassion in healthcare because I believe that compassion is the one thing that we can be focusing on to change the culture within the NHS. So what is compassion? Well, compassion...
Sorry, I just want to share the slide with the share screen. With the recording.
Compassion is that feeling that we've all experienced, but we know that there is somebody that really cares for us. Compassion comes from that moment when we can see the world through another person's eyes. In healthcare, I believe that it comes from people who love their work and who truly understand why they do what they do.
Compassion is about treating patients with dignity, respect, and empathy through your communication skills and through your actions.
It doesn't take very much. It can be a very small gesture that the nurse may do. I only this morning dealt with a lady that had come about 10 miles on the bus. She was elderly. She would have been entitled probably to have hospital transport. She made her own way here. When she came in, she was cold. So a cup of tea, 2 biscuits, and she was much, much happier. And that little thing really does make a difference.
I think it's particularly powerful when we are feeling vulnerable in physical or psychological pain, or when we are afraid.
My son is bedbound for 6 weeks, so boredom is a big factor. So if he was just left alone in this room, he would deteriorate, become sort of depressed and almost. So the nurses come in with cheery faces. They ask quite often, do we need anything? Even the dietitian comes in and they'll try and encourage him to eat by sort of giving him star charts and goals to aim for. So they're trying to encourage him to get better.
The consistent theme is that it is always the smallest things that make the greatest differences.
You hear so many stories nowadays about people being treated as a number, and it's my experience that the professionals that are looking after me really do seem to care about what's happening, what they can do about it, and keeping me informed as to how they're doing it. And once you have that information, that empowers you then to obviously deal with your illness as best way you can.
And not only that, it's all the staff, even the canteen staff, how good they are as well.
Compassion isn't just about talking to the patients, it's making them feel safe in a nice, clean environment where they can feel at home.
They've really been so kind to me, or made me comfortable all the time. I might be a bit anxious or something, but it's just to sort me out.
I see compassionate care being delivered when the staff themselves feel cared for, when they feel free to speak openly, free from fear, then they work together as a team and they trust each other. I think that the most valuable gift that we can give each other and to our patients is the gift of time. Time to allow the patient to speak about what matters most to them. And most importantly, time for the staff to listen.
I think you have to show a genuine interest in the patient without being judgmental. Try and find out a little bit more about their lives, their beliefs, their values, in order to empower the patient to be able to make decisions about their rehab and the goals that we're going to set together.
They often divulge all sorts of different things about their worries at home. It might be who's going to walk my dog, what my legs in plaster. And it's things like that that we can help to facilitate arrangements that make a big difference to how they experience their care.
I believe that if we focus our attention on things that matter most to our patients, then we will gain their absolute trust. This trust will improve clinical outcomes, will improve financial outcomes, will empower patients to improve their quality of life, will reduce their dependency on their system, and improve morale of our staff. This has to be our number one priority.
Okay. So the objectives in this unit is to discover how to communicate effectively with people, to know how to collaborate with your colleagues, to learn the constraints in communication for us, you know, in the industry, understand how to report problems, to ascertain how to complete work correspondence and a continuous improvement, and then get the skills and knowledge for this unit. For the new guys, I know that there's a lot of new concepts. Perhaps it would be probably a bit easier because you work in the industry. You would know, you would have heard and gotten used to some of the documentation, the wording like care plans and things like that. So, but honestly, we repeat ourselves a lot. Almost every unit that you're going to get for the next 11 units, you will hear the same things. You will hear individualized plans. You will hear, all sorts of terminology and industry jargon that is, stays the same, and the concepts are repeated. So by the time we get to the end of the course, a lot of these things will be very familiar to you. You'll start feeling comfortable with it. These units are designed by the government. Not the units are designed, the blueprint is designed. So the unit of competency is designed by the government. And there's a blueprint on training.gov that gives us direction of what the government wants us to learn. And then Axiom went to design the material around the blueprint. So the blueprint is normally just one page, and it has chapter 1.1, and it has these 5 points in. This is what the government wants us to get out of chapter 1. And then as I go through chapter 1 and chapter 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, everything that's underneath that is Axiom's interpretation of it. So yes, just under there. I was just waiting for one more, but she can sign in if she comes.
All right, if I haven't put it through, I'll get it
Yeah,
signed.
no worries. So therefore, the bases are there, and sometimes I have my interpretation or my experience that I share through the unit. That is also not necessarily in your books. So you can't really follow me by trying to keep up with the chapters, because a lot of the things I would be sharing would be experiences and, incidents, and we'll be sharing incidents to make it real, to make it tangible for us when we go out there, because we remember stories much better than trying to just read stuff. So people learn different ways. We learn by hearing it, we learn by seeing it, and we learn by experience. So quite often the stories is part of the experience and getting through it. So in chapter 1.1 is to use verbal and non-verbal communication. Verbal communication are all the, you know, where we just have to be aware of when we communicate, that we communicate, especially because in the health industry, everything we write down, everything we communicate with our clients are legal things, are legally can stand in a court of law. And some of the girls that have been here a while, they know, and I say that quite often. Once you finish with this course, I give you a certificate to, like giving you a license to work with people. And let's face it, we are going to go places no one else goes. We're going to be touching people in places that no one else is allowed to touch them. So we need to be able to communicate properly to them that what is our intentions, and we need to be very clear about what we are doing so that there's no misunderstandings, because you can get into a lot of trouble if there's a miscommunication. You know, if you do something to a client or for a client that they did not understand and they misinterpret, you can, you know, stand in the court of law and be shamed, and terrible things can happen. So that is the nature of our work. You know, they talk about COVID. There's no personal space. There's no social distancing and care. It's, you know, it's just not there. So we get real up close and personal with people. So when we communicate, we need to be able to communicate very clearly. We need to be telling people exactly what are we doing, why are we there, and that same communication needs to go into our paperwork. At the end of the day, we need to be able to communicate in the paperwork exactly what we've done, not what we think we've done, or not how we thought we saw it, but exactly point by point what we've done. You know, clear and concise and exact. It has to be consistent and it must be credible. You can't lie, you know. And I know that out in the industry, and especially in disability, there are a few clients out there going from one company to the next company to the next company with behaviors actually destroying care workers' lives because they accuse them of things that are not true. Okay, there are people out there. So the more concise you are about your reporting, the more protected you are. You know, the more you have evidence, because it's evidence in the court of law. Every piece of document that you fill out, every piece of paper is evidence, and it has to be written in a formal manner so that it can stand in a court of law. It can't just be sloppy, you know, and it can't just be I thought that it was this, or, you know, an interpretation. It has to be clear and concise and precise and courteous. It has to be like that. Nonverbal communications are these things. It's, of course, it's written in, but we also talk with our face. We talk about with our expressions, especially if you talk to people with disabilities that have hearing impairments, that have autism. You speak to them, and they sometimes are your actions is much louder than words. With the elderly people, you know, you can say to him, "Oh, you okay, love?" And they don't hear that. But if you go and give them a good pat on the back, or you assure them physically, you know, in that non-verbal way, they get the message, you know, they understand that much better. And we all need that. It's part of holistic care, you know, that we need to be affirmed. We need to use our body language. We need to use our gestures. In our culture, in Australia culture and in European culture, we like making eye contact. We like knowing people hear us, and that, you know, and it's seen as a respectful thing. But in other cultures, I've heard, like, I don't think so much in the Islander culture, but in the Aborigine culture, especially the males, they don't like long time, you know, looking at them. It's like you're staring them down, you know, you're challenging them. It's the same in some of the European cultures, you know, the Eastern European cultures, they have a similar thing with, you know, eye contact. But for us, it is a way of showing respect, showing that we hear, that we listen. Giving people space, you know, personal space. it is a non-verbal communication thing. Yeah, I know we get very close, but you know, you still sometimes people do stand a bit close. Even there's a difference to giving care to somebody and then also standing too close to them. And your voice. Now I had to learn to use my voice a little bit better when I came to Australia, because as an African we are very monotone. It sounds like, oh, we're angry the whole time because we don't fluctuate our language the way you do. Had a run in the UK. We stayed for 2 years there. The British do it very, they like, it's almost like they're singing sometimes. The way their voice goes up and down. Australians are not too bad, but the British sometimes you can be. I'm so fascinated by the way they talk, and always question them, or they ask something in a question, and you think, well, that wasn't really a question, but just the way they structure their voice, and yeah, so it's all part of communication, um, and evaluating these nonverbal signs. How do people interpret it? When you work with people with autism, their interpretation of some of the nonverbal signs are actually quite out there. I don't know if any one of you have watched a show on Netflix called Love on the Spectrum.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It is absolutely fabulous. It made me smile all the way
Yeah.
Is it
through.
Michael, the one that's so confident?
Yes.
And he knows specifically what he wants, and it's going to tick off that box.
Yeah.
And that's something they do struggle with. They struggle with these things, these non-verbal cues. So it's something that we need to learn. Our posture, our gestures, our timing. So communicate services and information in a manner that's clearly understood. As I said, plan it. There's an idea, we think about it, we think it through, we encode it in our own mind. We, make sure that, and like I've been sending a message to somebody like this morning early, and my husband says, no, don't write that. I will understand it like that, because he knows the person. And then I'm looking at it and I think, oh, he's probably right. And then I reword it, So that's encoding it, because somebody might take offense at something you say because of their baggage, not your baggage. It's not your fault that they understand it like that. But we have to consider the person we are talking to in encoding our message, in our own mind. And then we send the message. I send it, and then I had a reply back, and the reply back was sort of okay, but there was some misunderstanding there already, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding some things. I receive it, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, now encoding it, and now I have to reply back. So we all have that in our lives, we have that with our clients as well. We have this line of communication and talking it. And in next week, the following week, when we do diversity, I have a little picture that I show, and I think I actually uploaded it here. It might come on just now. So yeah, making sure, it's coming up now. I'm making sure the message is understood. Now, this is the little picture I'm talking about. So we have two people, and in the middle, there's like a sieve. It's like a net between us, okay? And I do try to be very precise, even in these classes, talking to you guys, to make sure you understand, and I'm actually getting my message across, because there's in this space between us is our cultures, our baggage, our problems. We all have problems. Our interpretation. I always say, my husband and I have been married for 24 years. And oh my, can we misunderstand each other sometimes? Or can I sometimes make presumptions of things he say that he did, he didn't mean? And how much more will we misunderstand each other if we hardly know each other? If when we are so close to somebody and we misunderstand them all the time, I will say, yeah, don't do that. You just think I'm like this or that. And it's, no, I didn't, and then we have a whole argument over this, not, or don't talk to me like that. I didn't do anything. I didn't talk to you in any way, It's like, And we have these little mini arguments all the time about just the way we use our voice, just a certain phrase somebody is saying, you know, and that is all part of the sift between us, you know, this understanding the way our dads communicated, the way our mums communicated. I had a terrible dream about my mum. I woke up this morning with this dream that I had of my mum, and I thought of my mum, and she was disabled, and it just was really hard to communicate with her because she just didn't understand stuff, you know. And yeah, and I woke up with that, and I thought, I'm an evil person. I just had a fight with my dead mum, you know. And I'm like, you know, and it's I just really felt terrible waking up, and I think, why did I just have a fight with my mum in my dream, you know? Because she just never understood things. But it was her disability standing in between her understanding and, you know, us communicating with her. And quite often we had to repeat ourselves a million times, and then she'd come back still, and she still don't understand. So, and that's that influenced the way we talk. And it's gonna happen with the people you work with every day. Elderly people, they're in a different generation, you know. I had a student, she actually got reprimanded because she said to one of her clients' daughter, she said, yeah, she didn't want to do something. What did she say? She's just being something like she's just being a little silly about it, but she used like a inappropriate word. Yeah, she called her something like, oh, she's just being a little, I don't know, not little shit, but something like that, you know, rat bag or something like that. And then she got into very big trouble because she used that phrase, you know. But it's her generation. She's only like 17, 18, and you're looking after an 80-year-old, and you know, and there's that miscommunication, and she had to be reprimanded. Didn't you do communicate? Didn't your teacher tell you? Don't talk to people like, you know. So we have to be respectful and greeting each other and all of that, you know. Confirm people's understandings. And now this is the thing where we use jargon or we use emotional barriers, you know, when we communicate. When my husband always said, I don't want to talk to you emotional. So, well, I'm always emotional. So yeah, don't say that to me. You make me more emotional. I'm just passionate about it, you know. It's just who I am. It's just I always talk with tears, and he doesn't understand that, and he says I'm over emotional, or lack of the attention, or you know, physical barriers, language barriers. With the Filipinos, a lot of my RNs and ENs are Filipinos, and they all call her he or she. And you have to confirm, did you talk about her or about him? And because in their language, they don't have that pronoun, she and he. You know, they have a male and female, but they don't have he and she. So it's not a word that is part of their language. So when they translate something, they don't, you know, they're not used to that word. So they have to learn to be communicating properly so we don't misunderstand, especially being in a authoritative position and giving instructions to us. Now, can you go to her, and it's actually a him, and give him something, and you're like, are you talking about Mr. or Mrs.? You know, so just to clarify. And sometimes we might have to do that in our work, you know, because yes, we do work with a lot of foreigners as well. I'm a foreigner. So, you know, you work with people that are from other cultures, and you have to make sure that you understand people properly. And then the cultural differences that is always there, even within our own cultures. My husband's British, I'm Afrikaans. The way we do things are so different to what they do it. We are very similar to the Australians. We have really a flat sense of humor. We think things are, when we make a joke, it's like a real, like, and he goes, that's not funny. And I said, yes, it is. And he goes, who's laughing? And I'm like, I'm laughing. You know, because we pull a Mickey of somebody, or we, you know, call them a funny name, oh, you dickhead, you know. And actually you mean like you're my best friend, but they take offense at it. What's your problem, you know? I've just given you a compliment, you know, what's wrong with you? So always just confirm. Just make sure you actually do understand each other, and what you said is what you meant, you know, and make it clear, make understanding. Listen and request and clarify the meaning. Active listening is by repeating things back to them, and paraphrasing. Sometimes we need to change the way we structured wording, or you know, just change the sentence so that we put it in a different way, and just to make sure they've understood. Quite often, and I find that I would walk to an old girl's room and I would say something to her, and she's like, and then I have to paraphrase. I have to change my words around and say it again. And sometimes it's a little hard. You're standing there, how can I put this now so she can understand me, you know? And you have to like change it and so they can understand. So there's a difference between collaboration and confrontation. And so whenever this word comes up, I can't help myself. My son, he's 24 now, and I'm going to tell this joke on his wedding day. He phoned me from school. My eldest son is a problem child. My youngest son is just like a duck in the water. He's just amazing. And this is the younger one. And he phones me from school and he says, Mom, I've had a confrontation. And I'm like, in my car, and I rushed to school, and I got these at North High. And I go in there and I said, what's wrong with you? Come and look at, who did you have a confrontation to? Mom, I just can't pull when I'm at school. And he actually had constipation. So whenever I see this word confrontation, I can't. This is so funny. Anyway, I still remind him of it. So the collaborating with people, you know, we're working with them. We're working together. Guys, it's a hard industry, hey. There's a lot of bitches out there. There is. There's a lot of bitches out there. And when you go work in aged care specifically, because 90% of aged care work is done in a facility. And you're working with 30 or 150 other women. There's a few men, but they very far and in between. I wish there were more men. But, you know, and people have like real nasty ways sometimes. And we have to be able to communicate to them in ways that we can understand each other and we can work together. And I have had to talk to people about really hard issues, and it's all in the way you communicate with them that can make them a friend or an enemy. And you can go to somebody. I worked with a German lady once. Nobody liked her because she was just she's so short off, and you know, and she's a hard worker, and you know, she goes in, get in there, and she's like, and she's deaf. She wears hearing aids in both ears, and she's really hard of hearing. So and she's got her own way of thinking things, you know, she's just like, oh, and most people have a problem working with her. But I loved working with her because I can go to, and I could say to her, Dory, you know, that buzzer is going off. If you don't go and answer that buzzer, and that old boy has a fall, it will be on your back. They're going to come back and, you know, you can get into trouble. Not go and answer the buzzer. I'm answering all the buzzers. You know, it's just the way you do things. And she said to me, you know what, you always explain things in a way that I can understand, you know, because she doesn't listen, or she doesn't concentrate on some things, and then she does other things. And then I would say, you can't do that, you know, and this is why, and just explaining it nicely. And people, when you explain it to them, then they're fine. It's like at my husband's work, his receptionist the other day said to him, don't use the paper cups. And he's like, why are you paying for them? No, I drink tea, and that's just, you know, the cups are just in there because I drink tea. And he came home and he said to me, what is up with that? You know, I use one paper cup the whole week. I wash it out, and that's my cup. You know, I can use a paper cup. And I said to him, no, you know what she's saying to you? She drinks tea and her tea has stained the glass cups. And you shouldn't think that because the cups are stained, that they are dirty. And you are allowed to use the glass cup. You know, it is just miscommunication. And he took offense because he thought she doesn't want him to waste paper cups. But she's actually just saying to him, there's nothing wrong with the glass cups. It's just because I drink tea and tea stains the cups. You know, just sometimes people just don't say what they mean or say things properly, and you know, and the other person takes offense to it, and that's that collaboration. We have to try to figure ways out of communication, especially when we work with a bunch of women. You have to figure out how to talk to people so they don't take offense. You have to figure out who they are and where they're at. Sometimes you have to think for other people. My dad always said to me, when I'm driving and I'm putting my indicator on, he always used to say to me, don't put your indicator on too early. Because that guy that wants to turn in there might think you're going to turn before you need to turn, and he's going to come in front of you. And he always used to say to me, even when it's their turn to stop, you stop too and make sure that they decided to stop. They're actually going to stop. Because you don't know what other people think. You know, people just might not think at that moment and might just drive in front of you. And it's so valuable because the fact is you don't know where somebody else is at unless you pause, and sometimes you have to think for them as well, you know. And that's part of where two people can come together and discuss and disagree in a confrontation also, but in a way that is collaborative, you know, that we can understand each other. And it takes practice. And they do like employing ladies that are older in the aged care industry because we have a little bit more of these, not just compassion, but understanding for little things like this. A younger person sometimes just don't have it. They don't have the life experience to realize that, oh, that was just a miscommunication. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't personal or something like that. Some people can get angry for no reason and take it personal for no reason when it, you know, it's not necessary. So exchanging this information clearly in a timely manner. Also, when we are writing things down, what happened to our clients, you have to do it straight away. You can't wait another day. And that's part of the rules of keeping things confidential. That's of course our main concern with our clients' paperwork. It must always be under lock and key. There was a client, I think it was in Prosy or somewhere maybe early last year or the year before, where the care worker had the client's paperwork on the seat next to her, and the client's partner or ex-partner knew that that was her care worker, and he targeted it, wait for her till when she stopped somewhere, got hold of the paperwork, got hold of the ex-partner's address, and went to the ex-partner's home and actually locked her into the boot of his car. By eventually when they, you know, like were, because there was domestic violence and things involved. So it's really important that we keep our clients' information confidential.
So how does that work when if everything's on the phone and you haven't got, you know what I mean? Like if you've got no passcode or it's left unlocked and someone gets their hands on it, they can access all that stuff.
Well, 90% of them, you have a passcode. Hey, yeah.
So there's no passcode
yeah,
as well as the passcode to your phone.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Don't
right.
have any basic passwords. That's
Yeah.
a critical thing for
Yeah.
clients protection and that sort of work.
Yeah.
Is don't always manually enter in the password, because then you're sure guaranteed that it's actually protected.
Yeah.
If you have them saved, if you have any sort of reference saved, I must admit it's a whole lot easier to just quickly flick through and hit a button and I'm in.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, that's my phone. Well,
Yeah.
very easy to be tampered with, very easy for someone to go through.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So
You have to know to keep it confidential. Yeah. Be extra vigilant with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a passcode on your phone as well, and don't give your phone to anyone.
Yeah. So you'd
yeah.
probably be better off having a work phone and
Yeah.
personal phone.
Yes,
and that
you
kind of-
are
Yeah,
most
yeah,
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Some companies actually do, and I'm, as you say, in the same year now, I'm thinking like I should get a second phone because I do get some people SMSing me on a Sunday, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't really have any of my, because some of the things are on the hard drive, on the work hard drive, and I can't access it remotely. I can, you know, my email's fine, but some of the information I can't access remotely, so it's, you know, yeah, keep things confidential. I mean, everywhere you go, I mean, you can't even inquire on your husband's behalf. If he's opened the electricity account and you phone them, they won't give you the information, you know. And it's the same with our clients. And at Good Shepherd Lodge, we're not allowed to talk to the family. It's outside of a scope of practice. We're not allowed ever to talk to the family. It's only the RNs and the ENs that are allowed to do that. So some companies are really strict with, you know, confidentiality. But because with elderly people, quite often it's the dynamics there. There's 3 or 4 children, and one of the children has abused mom or dad somewhere along the way, and other children has put some things in place, and you know, and there's only one that is kind of the next of kin, and others are not meant to know things. So you don't know all those dynamics. So
22 years ago, my wife obtained a copy of my birth certificate from saying that I'm going to marry this man. And they divorced.
we won't do that anymore
Send me a
today.
copy of my birth certificate.
Yeah, imagine with you know, with fraud as well, like getting some information out there. Oh, it's just, I mean, especially with the internet, it's actually really scary.
Yeah, that might be pretty easy.
On chapter 2, I won't read all this again. There's 4 sections in chapter 2. This is the government's blueprint. This is all that they have in chapter 2. Whatever I add on there is our interpretation. And quite interesting, I have looked, I've worked on another, with another RTO before. And the way that they wrote their books was completely different to what Axiom has interpret the information. Axiom's information is very good, it's very solid. But sometimes I have a giggle at the way people interpret, but that's just the outline, the baseline. So chapter 2.1, to listen and clarify, agree timeframes for carrying out instructions. You know, people tell you to do things. What tasks you need to complete deadlines. That's why I like starting when I start this course to tell exactly what is expected from you. When does it have to be in? Some people confuse it and they think, well, I've got 6 months to finish the course. But what you have to bear in mind, you might have 6 months, but you have 3 of that 6 months will be placement. That won't be in the class. It's 120 hours that you won't have the time here. And if you don't use the time here adequately, then you're going to fall behind. You're not going to be able to get that done. And if you miss classes, which is understandable, people sometimes miss, then quite often some of like these goals, they will come through like a job provider, and the job provider has got an agreement with Axiom, and that agreement is only worth 12 to 15 to 20 weeks. After 20 weeks, my boss makes an agreement with another job provider and another new group comes in, and you won't have the freedom that some of these girls, and like he has, to come in and roll around. So if you enroll with Axiom and directly through Axiom, you have a bit more freedom to roll your course around than what you have when you come from a job provider, because they have agreements. I have that issue now with another job provider and another group that are enrolling people. We are halfway through the course. They're enrolling people, and I know for a fact that my boss only has a 12-week agreement with that company. So, and she's already got plans with another company to enroll another group in after that 12 weeks. What am I going to do with those girls that are halfway through? You know, they can't come back like you guys have just come back to do your first 2 units. So it is, you know, timeframes are important, and that's the same thing when you go into work. You know, you have timeframes. Aged care, guys, sadly, there's no ratios. You're going to go out there, honestly, and you're going to be looking, especially in the facilities, you're going to be looking after 32 residents, and there's going to be 2 of you. Think about that. 16 people you have to look after. You've only got one-on-one, don't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Some places you have two for one client.
Really does depend. Like, I've got a couple of scenarios where I do take a group, but that's more in the lines of, say, an event I took.
Yeah, social event or something. Yeah.
Yeah, took a couple of flights to the drags.
Yeah. But most of the time with care, you know.
Most of the time it's very individual.
Yeah. In aged care, it's not like that. And I mean, even you working home care, aged care, you've only got constraints like 15 minutes or 20 minutes with the client, don't you? Yeah. And you have to be in and out of there in no time, and you've got the next client lined up. And normally you have 15 minutes to shower a client. Now the union, and that's where our Queensland Queensland Nurses and Midwife Union, the union that I'm a member of, and I've got some enrollment packages, I think still. No, I don't. But I've got some information anyway. So there's just something about the evidence is in. Thanks to Queensland legislation, minimum nurses to patients ratios were implemented. This is in the hospital, and this is the findings they had. 145 deaths was avoided, 255 readmissions was avoided, 29,200 hospital days were avoided, and they saved 81 million just by putting ratios into the hospitals. Where in the hospitals it's 1 to 4, 1 to 4, 1 to 6. So morning shifts 1 to 4, afternoon shifts is 1 to 4, night shifts 1 to 6.
Usually the 4 beds in that one.
Yeah, and you have one nurse.
One nurse who does that one.
Where in aged care, there's no ratios. None at all. Australia is the only country, first world country in the world where there's no ratios. We have ratios in New Zealand, we have ratios in America, we have ratios in the UK. In the UK we were 1 to 6. And in Africa, we have 1 to 4. What's wrong with Australia? You know, why is it like that? Why? I don't understand. I really don't. We have 1 to 16. Now you tell me, is that even fair? How's that even possible? You don't have time. It's like a conveyor belt, you know. Just get everybody's bums wiped. Just get them through, you know. It's just unreal. And we are hard fighting for ratios. I've drawn up petitions with 500 names on 4 ratios, and it was just tossed in the fire, you know. It's like, we have to keep fighting, and that's just the union is the only ones that can help us, because the union has changed labor laws through the centuries. They're the only ones that really have made a difference in labor laws. They're the ones that established that we have holidays, that we need holidays for our health and safety. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have basic pay. So, you know, we are fighting for ratios because the deadlines are just out there. You just, they are trying that. And I think the one thing that are pushing through government this year still is that every person needs 2.5 hours one-on-one time a day. So then they have to go figure out that if you have a client that needs personal care for at least 2.5 hours a day, how do you divide that between 3 shifts? But you just go and do the numbers. You know, 2.5 hours over 24 hours. If you here, it still doesn't really, you know, it still doesn't cut it. It still doesn't, because some people need 24-hour care. And how do they fit into that category? So we have to understand what to do. We have to be, and I love I love working under that environment, planning, and, you know, get your day done and try to figure out how to get through your work efficiently without losing the quality in what you're doing. And, you know, and before you go into a room, have all your things together. When you do your paperwork, you know, how do you keep your paperwork close by to do your paper? The one person is busy showering the person, the other person is busy doing the paperwork and making the bed. and working together, planning your day and sequence and order of our task. How long does it take? What documents are required? What equipment do we need? We get to the room, the person needs a full hoist. They need to go into the shower in the shower chair. They need all sorts of things. We need 3 towels. We need face cloths. We need the clothing. We need all of that, and plan that and get it all together. Don't run in there, start going, and then, oh, I've got no towels. And then somebody, you let them sit naked on the shower chair while you run off to go and get some towels. I've worked with people that do that. So, it's not, sometimes also you get into situations where it's not planned, and, us happened to me. An old boy's made a big bog in his pants, and I take him to his shower to shower him, and put the shower on, and when I turn around, there's no towels. And he's got poo everywhere, and I've already got poo everywhere on my uniform and everything, and I'm standing there, and we've got these little intercoms around our necks at Good Shepherd, and it's called Visera, and I'm Visera. Visera, please call for help. And because I'm anxious, she doesn't. I don't understand. I can't leave him. How I leave him now is like he's out of there. He's bolting, and I'd have to clean the whole hallway, not just him. Oh, yeah. So just, yeah, sometimes, yes, it's unavoidable that, you can't plan, but this is all part of safety, it's all part of person's privacy and that type of thing, to really make sure you manage your time, you make sure you have the right assistance. There is some of the home care companies where they are sending out girls to go and look after people in full hoist to assist. Actually, really, when there's a piece of equipment involved in any care, you need to be 2 people there, and they only send 1 person out to go and look after that person. It's a health and safety risk, massive risk. Make sure you get the help that you have, and use the technology. And it's the same in the class. Use technology. It's to your advantage. There's different types of systems. We have reporting systems. Like I said, for Sarah, we have our staff handover times, family, and then in our industry, there's a chain of command. It is set up as a militant thing. We have RNs and ENs over us, and then after that comes the CNs and the managers. In the olden days, they were called sisters and matrons, and we were all white dresses with little things on our shoulders, and we even had caps. Yeah, these days it's t-shirt or whatever with just the logo on. It's not as rigid anymore, but we still. In aged care, we are called assistant nurses, AINs. We are firstly the assistant to the RN and the EN. We're the assistant to the nurse. They are the ones that are responsible for the client. We are responsible for the client, but when we go to a court of law, we are not going to be responsible. The RN and the EN is responsible. So they are our first priority, and our clients are their responsibility. So indirectly, our clients are our responsibility, but the nurse, everything goes through her or him. They're the ones we constantly call and say, she's got bruising, she's not feeling well, she's not this. What do I do? What do you want me to do? She doesn't get up. She's this, she's that. We're constantly calling them all the time. We don't just make decisions out of our own. We have that chain of command. We have to go through that. It's very, very important. Never do anything out of your scope of practice. I just had a student, she was actually, was it you guys on the Friday class? She was on the Thursday class, you might have met her. Katika, yeah? She went off to OSCE, and I'm sure she won't mind me using this example. She went off to OSCE last week, and she went into a client's home, and she reported, she said the client's got bruising. So she phoned the manager or supervisor. She said the client's got bruising. So the the supervisor's response to her was, oh yeah, the client always has bruises. She said, okay, well, and then they're sitting there, and she had like hour with, she had an hour with the client, and within 15 minutes they had done everything that they needed to do, so they still had time there. So she said, oh, and we said chit chat. She's so cute. She will go, oh, we chit chat. She's a really compassionate person. She did last Thursday such a big
Yeah, the graduation
thing, she bought a banner and she bought flowers and they bought food and they really went all out there, and that's all Katika. That's how she is, that's her personality. So she was sitting there and she's like, I can't sit here and do nothing. So she started massaging that old girl's feet. That's the wrong thing to do. And when she phoned me and she said the client's bruising, and they said she always bruise, I already said to her, that client's on warfarin. They should have told her. She was there with the buddy. She's doing 120 hours placement with no money, not getting paid for the placement. The buddy didn't stop her not to do it. And she's from Indonesia. She's one of those that comes in there. When you go lie there for a massage, you you cry. She made one of our students, she had the ankle, and she was massaging her ankle in the class in the beginning of the year, and the poor student nearly climbed onto the table while she was massaging her ankle. But then the next day the ankle was well, so, but she didn't know this old girl was on warfarin. The next day, when management walked, or the carers workers in, that old girl's feet were black and blue, the whole feet. So she was fired on the spot. She hasn't even started, and they emailed me. They said she needs more training.
Yeah, well, she's nice.
They should have told her.
Yeah.
But I did say to her, and I said to her over and over, and I say it again to you guys, stick with the care plan. Okay, you don't do anything more or anything less. Stick with the care plan.
We've got a new client that's just come in, and she's all hush hush as well. We can't talk about anything about her just yet. And something just happened, and we didn't know anything. And we're like, well, why haven't we been told? Like, we just went through this the other day, and it was stressful. I'm like, this is crazy. I said, we didn't get told nothing. Like, both of us, two both of us. So it happened, but she gets hospital in here. There wasn't anything. There was nothing in the medical, nothing in the.
Yeah, and if you don't know, yes, what you wanted to say, Tina?
You said, I let them be aware of the beaches out there. That's all it is.
And she reported it, and it was that supervisor should have said to her, this client's on warfarin, be careful, she bruises easily. If you don't know, you don't know. If you've never worked in the industry, that's why we're not meant to do medication. No. Exactly why we're not meant to do it, because it's not within our scope of practice. We don't know what medication does. Even if you had saw that she had warfarin, you still wouldn't necessarily know what it's for. You wouldn't know that that's a blood thinner and that would bruise the client. You cannot even look at a client like that.
Experienced yourself,
right? Yeah.
I was on my warfarin when I came out of hospital, and yeah, that was one of the things.
Yeah, you bruise for no reason. So she didn't know that. You need to stay within your code of practice. You need to stay within your care plan. Don't move outside of it ever. It might seem like they are limiting us. Guys, it's for our own protection. It's there for our protection. If we didn't get trained in something, we don't, you don't do it. Unless you get a certificate and you've got the certificate, you can do it, But if you don't have the certificate, like it was your training plan we changed. Hey, you were doing community access, yeah. And then Chrissy was thinking, well, home and community, she'll be doing personal care. And there's nothing on home and community for her to do personal care. So, she came in for our simulation, and she said, and I said, well, you don't have to do simulation. It's not part of your training. So then
they demanded me to come in that day.
Yeah, but then also, but that person's gone now. But anyways, the thing was that they enrolled you in the wrong course, because she told them what she wanted to do, but they enrolled it in the wrong. So she would have had the wrong certificate. When she walked out there, she wouldn't have been able to do what she wanted to do. So that happens, but and then you cannot then go and do something because you haven't had the training. So just always make sure that you stay within your scope of practice. And there it is. I'm jumping ahead of my slides. Scope of practice. So scope of practice is something, if you haven't heard the phrase yet, it refers to the actions and the procedures that you are permitted to undertake, and usually refers to licensed individuals, okay? Usually refers to RNs and ENs. And these scope of practice are very precise. The union lady was here last week. She's an RN now at Proserpine, and she still practice. You have a registration if you're RN, and you have to pay the registration every year, and you have to do a certain amount of personal performance training to maintain your registration. And she said that the scope of practice has changed for her, that they always used to be able to insert catheters in males and females as RNs, but they're not allowed to do it anymore. Only doctors are. So they've taken it away from the RNs as well. We used to be allowed to do it when I did my training in the 80s. I've inserted catheters, but it's not, they've taken it off our scope a very long time ago. But they've even taken it off the RN scope now, the male catheter specifically. So because it's a real difficult thing to do. So it's only the RNs, only a doctor that is allowed to do that. So such as nurses, paramedics, and it generally refers what you're licensed to do. Though unlicensed workers always have restrictions in place and on actions we can do and cannot do. But at the same time, our scope of practice changes from company to company. It all depends on their policies and procedures. You know what I'm not allowed to do at Good Shepherd Lodge, I probably can do in the community. If you go and apply for a job at the base as a care worker, as an AIN, the first thing they're going to ask you in your interview is, what is scope of practice? And they do that on purpose, because at the base, you're not allowed to do personal care at all. You just sit there and look at the client lying on the bed and make sure they don't get up, and call the nurse if they do. So your scope of practice becomes smaller depending on where you are working. Out at the community, some of them are doing self-medication, and it's classed as self-medication as long as the client actually puts the medication. You can put it in their hand as long as they put it in their mouth themselves. You can't put it in their mouth. Then it's not self-medication anymore. It's also only certain medications that they are allowed to do. The other ones are still kept under lock and key if they are certified medications. We're not allowed to touch those. Still not allowed to do injections. Still not allowed to do intravenous drips. You're not allowed to do oxygen. You're not allowed to do, it's like a nurse doing an operation, RN is not allowed to do an operation. They're not trained. You get surgeons that do that. It's the same thing. So this is where organizations' requirements are also important. I'm using this terminology as well, and there's lots of different terminologies. What time is it? I'll just finish this one and we'll have a break. That we need to use verbally and written and digital communication. Like if you work in a hospital, you get used to things like, and it's in our books, one of our questions, industry terminology, and it's these things, activities of daily living. When you do go for an interview out in the community, they'll always ask you that in just to trick you up. They go, do you know what ADLs are? Just to be funny with you. It's just activities of daily living, and that's what you generally do when you go look after people. Bowels open, that's very important, especially in aged care, but so much so even in disability. Very, very important that every day we record whether they've made a poo or not. Very important, because that, you know, that can be a source of so many behaviors if they haven't gone to the toilet, and source of a lot of illnesses can come from the fact if people don't move their bowels regularly. So you'll get these terminologies, BO or BO, BWO, bowels well open, that you will record every day in their paperwork. Doctor, we all know that one. BD is twice a day, TDS 3 times a day. Blood sugar levels, BGLs, you'll get asked, go and do a BGL or go and do a UA, which is a urine sample. Or MSU, which means if you've done if they ask you to go and do a UA, that's just the ward test. And then once you've done the urine ward test, and the ward test shows that there's some infection in the urine, then they'll tell you go and do a MSU, which means then you go and you put the cup there midstream while they're peeing and capture the urine into the cup and seal it in clean cup with a sterile cup, and you send it to pathology for testing. So then they can identify which bugs are there, and then they give them specific antibiotics. We do that a lot. Next of kin, it's also in, you know, in OK, that will all be like in their care plans, beginning of their care plan. Some of these terminologies will be there. But I mean, don't worry that, you know, these things are like, sound like it's a lot of things that you need to know. You do, it gets repeated, and when you go out there, you slowly get exposed to it. It's not like you're not going to be expected on the first day or thrown in the deep side. You'll slowly get used to a lot of these things. All right, so we'll have a quick break. We'll have 15 minutes break. All right, so chapter 2.4 is follow communication protocols to apply interactions with different people and lines of authority. So of course the scope of practice is exactly that. So we know what our line of authority is and who do we report. So we also need to probably sort of have an idea. What does the RN do? What does the EN do? What are they allowed to do? You know, who do I go to if I have a specific problem? You know, do I go to the RN or do I go to the CN? Do I go to the main manager? Sometimes I do prefer that we first go to our RN and then give our RN the opportunity to report to management. And if they don't, then, you know, you go to management. But you have to go through, you know, the correct channels. Yeah. There's always every company has their own protocols and organization policies and procedures. I was just laughing this morning because Brenda Lee, the other trainer, came in next door and she said to the guy, I don't know if some of you heard, she goes, oh, are you from, what was it, BCF or something? And when we were doing the health and safety unit, I was telling people, explaining policies and procedures, that if you, I don't know if you've ever been in Coles or Woolies and they go code yellow or a code green, which is like there's a spill in the vegetable aisles, or code blue, and it means that somebody is stealing, you know, and then it alerts all the staff.
I was at Woolworths the other night and a bloke had a whole bag for groceries and just walked straight out the front door.
Yeah, they do that.
Yeah. But it was only 2 staff on, and I'm like, you do realise you just walked out the door with like a whole bag?
Yeah, but they
Do
can't.
No, they can't do anything. Some fella just walked in with a whole trolley the other day, and the lady's like, thanks.
Oh wow! I worked with Coles. When I first came to Australia, I did product awareness, and in the back of the Coles, you know, in the staff rooms, they had a big thing up. It wasn't in the one in Sydney Street. They had the figures of how much money, how many value of stuff gets stolen in a year, shoplifted. That was something like $60,000 a year, just in one place.
The IGA always usually takes a photo and puts it up on the
Yeah, yeah, this all for shame them, yeah.
You know this person.
Alita, so how could Katika's situation have been
get bruised and get hurt all the time, you know. I had another lady with the cot side with the bedside on, and she wants this bedside because she rolls herself, so it's an enabler for her because she uses it to roll herself. She was in a car accident, she's a paraplegic, and she and then we put, because when restraints, there came some laws out with restraints with the new aged care standards, so we had to put bedside covers on for her to protect her. And then she hated the bedside covers, and she started fighting with the covers, and she actually also bruised herself just trying to get the covers off. So, you know, some days you are damned if you do and damned if you don't. You know, it's like quite often you're in these situations that things like that happen, and you know, and yeah, sometimes we do get held liable for things when it wasn't our fault, or you know, we haven't. And that's why the union is so important, because when there's no way we can restore our reputation, you know, you can get a warning and you might not be found guilty and you might carry on working, but your reputation is harmed, you know, and you have to live with that. And living and working when somebody accuses you of something when you haven't done it, and you have to carry on with life, sometimes it it devastates people. I had a student that she was told, she was accused of being rough with the lady because she helped her legs off the bed. And just she said in the way that she did it, she was accused that she was too rough, and she was um, she reprimanded by her company and then asked to resign. It never went on her blue card, nothing. Never, she was never found guilty. But because she was asked to resign, she lived in a caravan. She went into a caravan. She didn't come out of it for 2 years. When she came back into the class last year, when she did the training with me, by probably a month or so in the training, even 2 months in, we were doing the work health and safety unit the day. And I was talking about something, and she started crying. And she said, you know what happened to me? First time she's spoken about it, 2 years. It takes it out of you, especially if you're a loving, caring person and you know you've never done anything to hurt anyone else, and you get accused of something like that. It takes it out of you, takes your will to work away from you. You know, I've had people that were amazing workers and amazing contributors, and then something happens to them and it changes their attitude towards the whole way they work, and they become the worst people to work with just because they just couldn't care less. We get accused of stuff, so why should I care, you know? So we have to protect ourselves and stay within the company's policies and procedures, stay within the rules. It's just for your own, you know, your own sanity, for your own mental health, for your own protection, that you need to stay within it, and do everything you can to stay within it. Identify signs, so addressing constraints in communication, identify signs and potential complications, behaviors of concern, and those are, there's a lot. And aged care, I don't know, probably if I'll pull out the thing there, I would say probably about 70–80% of our aged care residents are all demented. And if you talk about dementia, you talk about behaviors of concern. You can't take those two away from each other. You have lots of behaviors. And in disability, you have lots of behaviors. It's part of our jobs. And yeah, we quite often stand in situations where you really have to be so creative to try to get yourself out of that situation, just because there's, you know, the client's doing something outrageous, you know, and trying to figure out how to deal with something. Emergency medical emergencies. This is where the first aid is essential, because yeah, we're not meant to do CPR. If you're in a facility, the CPR will be the RN's job, and you can call the RN. But if you are all by yourself out in the community, You know, you're not going to stand there and wait for the person to die. You're going to do whatever. And I always say, sue me. If I wasn't meant to do it, you know, that's where emergency, when it comes to emergency, if it's outside my scope of practice, sue me then afterwards. If I saved your life, then sue me. You know, I'm not meant to help people when they're choking, you know, and I'm also not meant to, you know, and I'm going to go back to the way I learned and it was trained into me, and I'm going to use a method that I'm probably not meant to be using, but I know it's effective. And if I save that person's life, I've saved that person's life. Then, you know, we'll worry about the consequences later. At least I won't go and crawl in somewhere and feel sorry for myself, because I know I would have done the right thing, you know. Short staff is a big, big, big thing. So many times we will work in situations where we're going to work short staff, and especially now with the COVID stories, if you have a slight fever, you can't work anyways, you know. So before, we still used to go to work when we're not feeling so great, you know. You've got a migraine and you have a fever. You've got a fever because of the migraine, and you know, you still soldier on, but you can't do that anymore. They send you home. They take your temperature before you even go into the house. So they work short staff. I want to say every single day now at Good Shepherd Lodge, they work short staff. I think it's like once a month that they have a shift where everyone's there, or that they have full staff. And it's, you know, we already are stretched so thin. We already just 1 to 16. What do you think happens when there's short staff? And then there's abuse and neglect. And there's when there's abuse and neglect, there's always a mandatory report. Again, this is different from company to company. At Good Shepherd Lodge, we only do a mandatory report for sexual and physical abuse. I know out in the community, you will do a mandatory report for neglect and for financial abuse as well. So for any type of abuse in the community, you do a mandatory report. That means it has to be reported to the police within 24 hours. Now, originally, mandatory report was connected to child abuse. So it made it an obligation to report something. And then we've adopted it in aged care, or for vulnerable people now, to also say that some abuse we have to report to the police. It's our obligation to do that. We don't have a choice. And if you don't, you can get into trouble for not doing it. I think there must be somebody has told me, and I forgot, but we have a saying in Afrikaans, the sharer is as good as the thief. Is that a saying in English? That if you share with a thief, you also considered a thief. If they stolen something and you take part in what they've stolen. So it's the same principle. If somebody is an abuser, you as good as the abuser if you don't report them, you know? You stand as guilty as them. Sure, there's a phrase for it. Yeah. Yeah. So always make sure you do the reporting, and with compulsory reporting, you will immediately call your supervisor verbally, but you'll also go and write in compulsory report. You will write it out. And maybe even in other areas in the care plan, you might go and write it in. There's some other constraints in communication, and we have to try to resolve that, and other techniques. Maybe there's linguistic barriers and psychological barriers, systematic barriers, or attitudinal barriers. You know, you have people like this morning in my dream, I was fighting with my poor mum because she had probably all of these in her disability. She was 4 years old when she had a blackwater fever, and she suffered brain damage, and she had a mentality of a 16-year-old, if not younger, maybe 13-year-old. My grandma raised us all, and then later on when my grandma got sick, I raised my brothers and sisters, and and my mum was just, her language barriers was just not there. She just, you know, her language abilities wasn't there. She was just not understanding things, concepts and ideas and things, you know. She was 4. Yeah, when she got blackwater fever, which is the Spanish flu that she actually got, yeah. and got um, high fevers for 4 or 5 days, and then her heart stopped, and then she suffered a lack of oxygen. So both her eyes was pulled, squint, and her hearing was affected as well from that. So she was deaf and half blind, and then she had verbal constraint, like mental disability. And it was so hard, like communicating with her and explaining something to her. And because she would not listen to you, and then she would just repeat herself, and then you get that with disability all the time. You repeat yourself over and over and over.
So your grandmother was there the whole time.
Yeah. And my dad was a saint. My dad was the absolute saint. He really was. So respect others' differences in communication, understand clear understanding, and use appropriate forms of communication, attend to the needs of your client, and work to the benefit of the service. In reporting, we always have to comply with legal and ethical responsibilities. So when we talk about ethics, it's very hard to really put your finger on it. Ethics, I can say to you what it's not really, but ethics refer to the standard of behavior that tells us how human beings ought to act in many situations in which they find themselves. So when you like a doctor, they would have lay down an oath at the end of their training when they finish after 6 years or however, before they get their endorsement. They would say, well, I will do no harm. Or a lawyer, they will have that code of conduct or ethical declaration that they make. For us, it's not really an ethical declaration we make, but we do have a code of conduct. Yeah, we have a National Healthcare Workers Code of Conduct. I can't have it up on the board, and I'll just put my foot on there.
It used to be the Hippocratic oath. I used to take one to be a bomb.
Yeah, but we don't take that. The RNs and ENs probably take it, but we don't. Yeah. So, but we have a national code of conduct for healthcare workers in Queensland. So it's kind of like our code of ethics. And one of the things in here, which is very prevalent to us as trainers as well, is that a healthcare worker with certain mental and physical impairments must not provide treatment to clients while suffering from physical or mental impairments, disabilities, conditions, or disorders, including drug addiction, alcohol addiction, where it places the person at harm. Healthcare worker has, if a healthcare worker has a mental or physical impairment that could place the client at risk, they can't work in the industry. So quite often, the job providers send people here just because they need to put them in jobs, and there's lots of jobs out there. And then I've had some characters come in here that's just come off the drugs, and and they're like fidgeting, and they like all sorts of funny things, and I'm like, I think this is the place for you. You can't imagine you have somebody with autism. And I've had that. I had one student, she's autistic, and she's in the class, and she's firing up everyone in the class because she gets irritated by people talking. This is an interactive class. And then she starts fighting with other people in the class because they're too loud or causing arguments. And how would you deal with it if you walk into a client's home and they go at you at something? How are you going to deal in that situation if you haven't got your wits about you? You really need to be top of your game. It's the same in aged care, and especially dementia care. You need to be top of your game. You have to have enough sleep. You can't, the dog just died, and my son's just gone to jail, and the other one has just broken his leg, and oh man, I didn't sleep a thing last night. And then you come to work, and you're in a situation, and you can't deal. And as you're quite often seen as the leader of the pack. You're kind of like the ringleader, and you're in between all of the crazies, and if your wheels comes off, their wheels come off too. You know, you have to be on the top of your game, and that's part of our code of ethics is to, you know, be in control of our emotional well-being, and you know, be reasonable, don't judge people, accept people, you know, work in a way that's ethical, respectful. And that's part of our duty of care also. And duty of care, and when legally and ethically, which is our third unit we're doing, duty of care is a legal requirement. It comes under the tort law. You actually can go to jail if you don't give reasonable duty of care. So it's something we have to bear in mind. And duty of care is to take reasonable care that you don't hurt somebody. And when you are caring for them, that they don't hurt themselves. And there is that conflict between duty of care and that person's self-determination, and they you know, they sometimes, you come to somebody, they've got a dirty pad on for 2 days, and they refuse you to take the pad off, and they, you know, all sore and blood and everything, and you know, you can't force them. In the olden days, we used to. 3 of us would go in, and I would hold their hands, and the next person would pull that pad off, and we would wash her bum whether she likes it or not. You can't do that anymore. Can't do that. That's restraint. That's excessive force. You'll get into very big trouble. You can't do that. That's abuse. You have to let that person do, and they take risks. That's their choice, and it goes against everything in you. You walk into a room and somebody is, you know, in an awful state, and they don't want you anywhere near them. You know, we just have to walk away, come back with a different shirt on and a big smile on your face, and try again, you know, until they say yes. But that's where our duty of care sometimes go in overdraft, because we, you know, we just want to do something about it, you know. So there's adverse events, and that might put your client in danger. Incidents like, you know, they've fallen, or they bumped their head, or they've had a behavior of concern, or sometimes maybe a medical, you know, reaction. They might have a, what's it called, allergic reaction to something, and then that, you know, that's adverse event. That's why it's so dangerous to give medication, because you don't know medication, and you don't know necessarily which medication would have which kind of side effect, you know, and then somebody has a reaction to something and you're not aware of, and but those are like adverse events. So in these instances, we have to always report, and sometimes also there's breaches of duty of care. You might walk into somebody's home, and I mean, it's true also, we work in teams, and some days you might walk in a home and you see, oh, the dishes hasn't been done, bed hasn't been made, person is in an awful state, their nappy, their pad is wet, and you know, everything's out of order. The previous shift didn't do their job. You know, we pick up the slack. You don't know what happened on the previous shift. That old girl might have been out of her mind. She might have been, she might have had a fall. Something might have happened. But if that keeps happening every time with a certain staff member, then that's breaches of duty of care. Then we have to report it. But we're obviously not going to run and report something after the first time it happens. You know, we have to be reasonable, and when somebody is not adhering to standard procedures. And this type of events should always be reported to appropriate people, which is usually the manager or the team leader, and you know, the RN. And so mandatory report, as I said earlier, is legal responsibility to report. For instance, child abuse, disabled or elderly abuse. Remember, mandatory report means that you must report suspected abuse. So just repeat that. Refer issues that impact on achievements of employment to your employer and your client's rights and responsibilities. The clients have rights to dignity and respect. That's at the center of the HK standards, their dignity and choice. All the other things hang on that. And it's the same in disability. Their disability rights and dignity of choice is the most important. And those within the standards, that's where a company gets audited. So if a company fails to meet 2 standards, they fail the audit. And then they get a warning, or they get told, fix it, or we lock your doors. And if they come back after 3 months, or however long they say, we'll come back in a week. If it's still not fixed, we'll close your doors. They closed aged care homes down south. What was that? Bupa care homes, because of their duty of care and their care standards. And it's not easy to fail. It's not difficult to fail 2 standards, because the dignity of choice is kind of like holding all the standards together. And if you fail dignity of choice, you automatically fail the other standards as well. Or you fail one of the other standards, and because it hangs on to dignity of choice, you fail 2 standards. So that's why it's so important that we keep their rights and dignity and choice. And right to be involved, their right to be informed, their right to other services. Those are part of the care standard, but they do have a responsibility. And part of the aged care standards are that they have a responsibility. They have to give us the correct information. They do have to treat us with respect. You can walk away if somebody is disrespectful towards you. You can say, sorry, I'll see you later. I'm not taking that. I have walked away. So, because you'll react if you don't, you know. And if somebody slaps you, then, you know, it's nobody has got the right to hurt you. Although it's sometimes expected from us to take the blows, but it's not right. And they have no right to do that. You can walk away. Obviously, I mean, I had a student, he said, I had this one client freaking out, and he got in his car, and then this client was chasing him, and he had a couple of bottles of water on his seat next to him, and he was driving, and then he was watching the client, and as he go, and then he drives around the block, and then he puts a bottle of water on the side of the road, and the client's still coming, you know, he just wants to beat him up and beat his car up, and he just stayed with the client and kept driving around and around and kept the client in his rearview mirror until the help came, you know. And he just kept hydrating him as it was hot out there, you know. So, yeah, walking away, but here's some water on the way, you know. I'll just keep an eye on you. So you still keep a bit of a contact there, but you don't have to put yourself in harm's way. You know, it's not right.
It can be unavoidable when it comes to mental conditioning.
Sometimes, but sometimes with dementia, it's can be completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yes, most of the time we can predict it, and most of the time we need to be aware. If somebody says no, you know, say, okay, it's all right, I'll be back later. Don't force yourself, because that's where most of the behaviors come from, and that's where they react, is where we force ourselves onto, oh, no, come on, man, you just have to get up now. This is just nonsense. And then you get a nice old smack from somewhere, you know. It's like, no, just, you know, walk away, and you could have avoided being smacked. But yeah, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I've sat at the feet of one old boy. I went down at his feet. He agreed that I can, you know, look out, take him to the toilet. He agreed to get there. He was sitting on the toilet. I had the pants down on his ankles already, and I bent down. I was on the floor, busy taking his shoes off, and he smacked me. Hey, sheesh, I didn't see it come. It was like right in the back of my head like that. My neck was sore for weeks after that. Sometimes you just don't see it coming. You just don't see it coming. But they also have the right to respect us. They have the responsibility to respect us and give us the, truthful information, and, you know, provide a safe environment. When you go out to homes when there is mold on the roof, on the walls, and there's clutter, and it's all, you know, not a nice environment to be in, you don't have to work in that environment. The client has a responsibility towards you in that. And resolve unresolved issues. Always report to your supervisor. That's what they're there for. Chapter 5.1 is complete all documentation according to legal requirements and organization policies. And I've got a little video. Bye.
Hi, my name is David Keegan. I'm an academic family doctor here at the University of Calgary. Today we're talking about how to write clinical patient notes, the basics. So first of all, why write a note in the first place? Why are we writing notes when we see a patient? And it's really important to think about these purposes because that's going to help us understand why we do things in the way we do when we write them down. So one of the main reasons we write notes is so that we can actually document for ourselves what we did with the patient, what we discussed, and so on, so that later on we can go back and look at those notes and see what we did and what we heard from the patient. Great. They're also there to help other people do the same thing. One of our colleagues or another health professional or somebody else might have to be taking on the care of that patient, and they need to be able to see what we did as well. And there's also a documentation reason to do it for good medical, legal, quality reasons, so that we're tracking what we're doing, so that if there's any questions later on, then the answers are there, what we actually discussed, what we came up with, so that there's actually like a source of truth around these things. So there's a variety of reasons. And if you're a clinical learner, and you probably are if you're watching this video, there's another reason to do it, is so that you can display that you can think about a patient in a clear way, so that you can work with the patient, talk to the patient, examine the patient, and document things in a way that shows you the clarity of thought and understanding about the patient and their issues. So with all that said, how do you actually write a patient note? Well, there's a few things you got to do. First, you've got to think about, is this the right patient record I'm looking at? So if you've seen a John Smith, are you looking at John Smith's paper chart or are you looking at John Smith's electronic chart? And it's amazing that in the era of electronics, how easy it is to be finding yourself in a different patient's clinical record, and you're happily typing away an obstetrical history on a 92-year-old man, and you just made a mistake. So be careful about that, and the very first thing you should do is check. Check to make sure you've got the right patient. Wow. So that's going to save you a ton of time, because if you ever do this incorrectly, it's a real hassle to fix all that. Next, if you're in a standard clinic, maybe it's a family medicine clinic or a gastrointestinal GI clinic, and that clinic knows that they're the only things working there, you might not need a title. But if you're in the hospital or in a multidisciplinary outpatient setting where you share files and so on, you might actually have to put a bit of a title or a heading. So the heading would demonstrate or reveal who are you working with, what kind of service or what kind of group are you with. So it might be something like, heading might be surgery progress notes or something like that. And then that way it's really clear to everybody what your note is all about. Now, some other things to help with the quality and safety aspects are making sure you've got the date and time correct. So you've got the date. The time may not be necessary, but it often is, particularly in inpatient or particularly in emergency or ICU settings. The time is also going to be very important. And you want to make sure as well that your name, who you are, is clearly identified. So your name is going to have to be there at the bottom. Typically, we're going to sign and print your name and put your pager if you have one, and your designation. So if you're a second-year medical student, find out what your designation at your local school might be. But it could be something like, Med 2 or something like that, so that everybody knows what this note is about, when it was written and conducted, and then who wrote it. Was it a medical student? Was it a staff surgeon or somebody in between? So if you have all these things down, this is going to help with the safety of the note itself, to make sure that's a strong, clear note. And then the content of the note is something different. What goes on the insides there's 4 key categories for any note, and you'll see them come up over and over again. And they fall along a mnemonic called SOAP. S-O-A and P. And S is for subjective. So in all notes, you're going to be describing to some degree the story as you understand it. Often it's told by the patient or the patient's family themselves. And where possible, use their words. So if somebody says, I'm short of breath, don't write down, patient had dyspnea for 4 days. No, you don't say dyspnea, you actually say, patient describes being short of breath. By using the patient's words, it helps capture things better in a more nuanced way. And sometimes we might interpret a patient's words to mean a fancy medical word, but maybe we've got that wrong. So you almost never go wrong by quoting the patient's direct words. So in the subjective, you're going to be finding out from the patient and documenting from the patient stuff that relates to the story, why they're here today, or what's the issue now that you're picking up from. Next is your objective. Stuff and objective is what's objective, what you are seeing or finding out through objective means. So it's a combination of usually the glance. So you might glance at a patient and see how they're doing. So if it's somebody in an emergency room who's here with asthma, you might have glanced at them across the corridor, and if they're sitting up playing their mobile device, then you might write, five-year-old child sitting up playing a mobile device. Or maybe they're reading a book or whatever. Or maybe they're quite ill and they're gasping for breath and leaning forward and looking quite scared. You might say distressed looking child, leaning forward, struggling to breathe. So those two descriptor glance sentences are very different. You'll also put an objective, things that you find. This is where your examination will go. And so the things that you find when you assess the patient, or you're looking at the bedside, you're looking at their heart rate, or you're checking their heart rate, listening to their lungs, all those sorts of things go under here. They're objective things that you are finding out. You're not relying upon somebody's story, no, stuff you're finding out. And then there's other objective things that will typically flow here as well. Labs or reports or whatever. You might have some other objective findings from tests will go here as well. The A stands for assessment. Assessment is what you think is going on, which is typically a diagnosis, but sometimes it's a differential diagnosis. And sometimes it might be an assessment of somebody's stability. Like if they're a long-term chronic type 2 diabetic, your assessment might be stable diabetes control, or unstable diabetes control needs more tighter control. Because everyone knows this patient's diabetic. There's no surprise about that. But the assessment today is their level of stability. So assessment can be a diagnosis or a differential diagnosis. If you have no understanding and you can't figure out what it might be, it could be like hypotension MYD. You don't know why yet, and that's okay. Not MYD stands for not yet diagnosed. And if you think of a certain diagnosis, like let's say you think it's hepatitis, put down query hepatitis, because you're not sure yet. You think it might be. And so there's different ways to make your assessment that sort of varies by the patient. But it's basically your judgment of what's going on. And finally, P stands for plan. So this is what's happening now as a result of you seeing the patient or you being involved in the patient's care. So it could be things like things that the patient's going to do. So the patient might, you might have been talking to the patient and they're going to be increasing their high intensity interval training as part of their exercise and going from 2 days a week to 5 days a week. You might have something like that. There might be some investigations you're going to do. So investigations might particularly help out with some areas of confusion that we already talked about under assessment. If you are going to give any therapies, they would go here. And therapies could be medicines or otherwise. Maybe you're giving them oxygen. Maybe you're going to be given a medication. And then if you're doing any consultations. So if you're going to be getting the patient engaged with anybody else. So like a dietitian, a surgeon, or whoever. So the content of the note is subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. And these are the main features of every single clinical note you're ever going to write. And to retrace, in order to make sure it's a good note that is actually worthwhile, that hits all the issues of safety and quality and so on, check to make sure it's the correct patient that you're writing a note on. Make sure you've got some sort of heading if you're in a multidisciplinary or a hospital-based environment so that people know who is writing this note and what it's for. Make sure you have the date and time entered. If it's electronic, that will probably come up automatically. But if you're on a paper record, make sure you record that. And finally, make sure it's very clear who you are. So you print your name, you sign your name, and then you have some sort of designation so people know who you are, whether it's a PGY 3, a med student, or whatever. So that's how to write patient notes, the basics. Thanks very much.
Obviously, some of those things are not really related to us, but indirectly it is to a certain degree. Obviously, we're not going to do diagnosis, but you're still going to do an observation. You know, you're still going to say, well, the client's blood sugar is high, which is a fact, you know, so you stick with the facts. But I like the thing that he includes the client's words as an objective, because in our course that there's a question where they say, you know, where they ask you there, and objective would, I think it's the multiple choice one, where objective is not one of the things we do. We're not going to put our opinion down, but we can actually, inverted commas, say what the client has said, and it is helpful to do that.
When
even
writing progress notes, your entry must be self-recorded.
Yeah, that's the one, yeah. So, and with that one, you're not going to circle subjective, because you can't put your own opinion, and in that frame, or in that understanding, it is that subjective. You can't say, I think the client fell over her shoes, because that would be subjective. But you can say the client said she fell over her shoes if she's on the floor. Otherwise, you would just write, I found the client on the floor. Even though you can see the shoes are sitting there, you know, you don't do that. And then, but you do some, you know, you do a bit of a judgment call. You walk into a client's room and she's confused, you straight away would, and I'm going to say this many times so you eventually will remember to do that, you straight away might do a urine test, because, you know, something that with older people that is a real thing, you know. And when they get confused, most often they have a urine infection, and you say, client acted out of control, out of character today. Writer, we normally speak of ourselves in the third person. We say, writer uh, collected a urine sample, and the urine sample reflected that some of the things are out of range, reported to the supervisor. So you would have done a sort of, you know, indirectly, you've done what do you call it? Yeah, you made a diagnosis, but it's not, you know, you didn't say she's got an infection, but you've implicated it. But always make sure that it's concise and accurate and confidential. Of course, lock it away when, you know,
You
make
wouldn't
sure.
say like on an incident concern of a urine infection. That's why the test
Yes, yeah,
was done.
yeah. You would just, yeah, before you done the test, you won't say, I think she's got a urine infection. You need to first do the test, and then you can say, client acted out of character, you know, did a urine test, and she's got protein in her urine. And once you've written that down, the RN would probably come back and say, could you give us another sample we can send away? Normally the doctor would first have to give a script anyways for pathology before they can send it away. So the RN would phone the doctor, say to the doctor, there's been protein in a person's urine, and then the doctor would send a script through and say, well, get a collector MSU, and then send it away. So there's still a process there, and it's still part of our scope of practice and our responsibilities. And because our scope of practice, because we're so close to people, you know, quite often people will say to you, oh, it's just a cert 3. I've heard that so many times. Yes, the work is quite easy, and yes, it's just a cert 3 level, and, you know, and what you're doing and what you're reflecting, and that may be just, but it's not just. You're putting so many hats on. You first responder. You're the first person that noticed something's wrong. You psychologist, you're their doctor, you are their pastor, you are their daughter, you are their son, you are their most close family member, you are the investigator. You know, There's,
parent.
you're a parent. I played the video to everyone on the last day. Was it? Did I play it in? Yeah, that's so touching with the interview. Yeah, with the mum and saying 24-hour care, and you got so many different aspects that you cover. So
I put a post up just on my general Facebook page going, mum in position live in, and I was like, no pay but reward in hug and kisses, must be multi-organized, and I'm like, nobody replied. Who doesn't want to be me?
Yeah, it's like I made the mistake. I started because I always go with the oldies. It's just something I've done for a long time because I work in dementia. They always want to pay you because they forget that they're there, and it's like, how can I pay you? I don't have money. I can't come now to dinner. And no, come, no, it's all right. It's been paid for, and you always have to do that. And they go, oh, can I not pay you? And I said, no, my currency is hugs and kisses. So the other trainer, he didn't know me yet, and he was away for when I started. He was sick, and he came back and he asked me to do something, and I signed it, and he went out and he says, oh, I don't know how to repay you. I said, no, my currency says then he didn't speak to me more. Must be careful. Some people might like think, oh, I'm coming on to you or something. But it's our responsibilities. It can be huge. It really can be huge. It might be not that hard. It might not be rocket science, but at the same time, you really need to have your wits about it. We have to have eyes behind our head. You have to know things about your client, and
even the childcare system is pretty much the same.
it's full on. Hey, you need to have your wits. You can't be stupid. Stupid people don't last in this industry, anyways. They just get completely overwhelmed, and not talking about intellectually stupid. I'm talking about people that are just silly. They don't last. You have to have your wits about it. So we do some personal care. If anyone ever told you you're coming in here, you're not going to wipe a bum, guess what? I've got news for you. You are going to wipe a bum. There's just no way about that.
Refuses to do that and chooses not to be in that
yeah, you're gonna go very
skilled lady.
Yeah, you're gonna go very far if you want to. I was just
because that's the other thing she made strong that I do not wipe. I
do not.
But I do teach my skills.
Oh yeah. And yesterday, this trainer came back. She went to Bow and she's doing a group of people there, and she was training some disability people, and they were there with their trainer like she would do. And she said the next minute there was a snake in the room, and they had all sorts of dramas. And she said the next minute the guy was coming out there, he was walking around there. She said, and then the smell hit her. And he was in the training, So old Jerry still got her work cut out for her. Wait, the day will come. And one of my other students, he was speaking yesterday morning. We had an NDIS breakfast thing, and he was speaking at the NDIS breakfast thing, and he was saying, why make them sit? There's no disability toilets in town. We need proper disability toilets with a hoist in and a change table. There's only one place really that there's. Why make somebody sit? Say there's a concert in center of town. We've had that when I had the Italian festival. There's so many people there, and okay, there's one sort of a disabled toilet, but there's no place where you can go change them. So now they need to sit there right through the concert with a dirty bum, just because you can't go and lift them up and change them. So that's part of our job, and we have a holistic scope. We do. We have, you're going to be sitting next to an old lady busy passing away, and you're going to be holding her hand. And you're going to be crying with their family. It's part of our job. It's what we do. We might even help them at home. I mean, a lot of you are going to probably land up in aged care facilities, but if you don't and you're in a home care, then you do a bit of cleaning and you do a bit of housekeeping and things like that as well. So Um, just complete all your documentation, follow the procedures. Also with digital media, we can't put on our Facebook, oh, I just had a shitty day today. Literally, you can't put that on Facebook. Most companies don't even want you to say that you work there, that even mention their name on Facebook that you work for them. And that includes, also the digital media, podcasts and videos and things like that. We have to be careful when we work with people. Again, just keep your documentation clear and objective. Who, where, what, when, why, how, and I've got another who there. When you work with people with a disability and behaviors and people with dementia, you always have to say who did what to who, because it's sometimes another client. Two clients are fighting, and then you have to say, or the one client, the client's care, but what does his behavior, how does his behavior affect the other people? And that would also be, that's why it's a behavior. So if he refuses to change his pants and he reeks of urine and he comes and sits at the table and somebody else gets upset because of his behavior, it has an effect on him, so it's got that another person always in your behavior plans. And especially in behavior reports are one of our money spinners in aged care. That's where we get money from for fundings. The more behaviors you can put in, the better funded we will be, the more nurses we can be. Because even the little behaviors that happens every day, you have to document that. I had a student, he's also just finished, Paul, he was with us. He was saying to us also, we were talking about this and and he said he had a client that has acquired brain injury that always sleeps during the day. And
Never was recording it.
yeah, nobody was recording it, and he started recording it, clients sleeping, because we spoke about it. And then he came back to us a few weeks later and he said the doctors just realized that the client's medication was all the wrong way around. And everybody was just assuming that, yeah, he just sleeps during the day. In the meantime, he was taking a tablet at the wrong time of the day. And, because nobody was recording it at first, nobody picked it up. Even when they say that, it always like that. Just keep recording it, because it really, really is so. The doctors come later, they come back after 3 months, and a lot of this antipsychotic drugs and stuff, they have to look at the side effects, or they have to look at how it affects their behavior. Is it still working? And if we don't record that, then they can't make that judgment. They can't determine that. So it's really important we keep doing that. We use the right type of wording, a monitor, observe, instead of keep an eye out. Put the client's legs up. You say raise your legs frequently, often. Reduce, elaborate, remove, resembles, complaining, dressing them, grimaces. Those are types of, and I struggle with this passive and active voice still, because I suppose because I'm Afrikaans, and it makes it hard for me. I always Grammarly always complains at me because I'm doing that doing that wrong. So I contribute to improvements at the workplace. Just always write little ideas down. There's constantly, we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always getting better at it. We're all about working smarter, not harder. So if you've got a way of doing something and it's easier, write it down as a suggestion, so that there's a continuous improvement. And that suggestion might lead to them changing the policies and might lead to something getting changed. And I've seen that many times. It enhances the outcome for the client. It gives us, makes us work better. It helps with that. And it goes around, you put the idea in and they look and they say, oh yeah, this is working, and they add it to the scope, and it's always going around. Areas that we can improve is infection control, emergencies, or all sorts of, there's many areas in client services and all that. Promote a model of change and procedures according to requirements. As, assume that everyone prefers to feel important, needy, useful, and successful, proud, and respected, rather than they feel unimportant, interchangeable, anonymous, wasted, unused, expendable, or disrespected. We all want to be respected, whether we are retarded or that's a horrible word, but you know what I'm saying? Some of us cannot have a disability and be retarded. But we all want to be respected. We all want to be acknowledged. We were talking about a behavior plan yesterday, and one of the things that we were talking about came out that I also just a new realization was that when somebody when they're the center of attention, when they want to be the center, like a Down syndrome person or something like that, it is a need they are communicating. They communicating that they feel insecure. They feel unloved if they can't feel or see you appreciate them. And that's the same for most of us. If you've been think people like being in the center of attention, it's because that person has got a need for being, being loved and being acknowledged. So just in complaining and the process, oh, no, sorry, this is trying to accomplish how we change, improve. It's just changes that will make us, that will result in improvements. Is planning something, doing it, studying it, acting it out, and going around. It will help us to give better services, really. Okay, and then the last concept I'm just going to have a short talk about is continuous improvement. So our professional development. When you are RN, you have to do, I think it's 30 hours a year of study within to keep your registration. The ENs have to do a few less hours. Even as doctors, they have to go to a certain amount of conferences and do a certain amount of training. They have to always keep up with the training. We don't. Okay, we don't. I have to, as a trainer and assessor, I have to log some hours and stuff. But as an AIN, I don't have to. But it is very helpful to keep up to date. It is very, most companies has compulsory training every year where they do health and safety training, and you have to go there every year. And, and like, just sitting through another fire training, and I've done probably about 300 of them in my life. I can just about give one, but you always go and I always have these compulsory trainings. Like last year, the HK standards came out. That was in compulsory training. Everyone had to do that. But with professional development, that's the same thing with this doing a HK course or disability course. Maybe you do the disability course and you're interested in HK. If you keep your eye open at your workplace, there might be a flyer coming from the base saying there's a dementia course going at the base. And then that would be free. A few weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, there was a whole range of courses going at the base. They were doing wound care, dental care. There was like, I never tapped into it. I heard about it in a roundabout way, and I never got to get the information on that. But normally it's Cert 3s that are nationally recognized, and then they come around once in a while. I did it at Good Shepherd a few years ago. That specific group that was doing it at the base, they came to Good Shepherd, and we had a whole week of training, and we did palliative care, dental care, and wound care. We did 4. What was the 4th one? I can't remember. So we did 4 Cert 3 units through this company that was nationally recognized. Those are the additional things that we don't cover on, we don't have time to cover in our course, but you can pick them up for free, from the base, from the MATA, even from the Mackay Visitors Association. I've done a dementia course with them some years ago. Sometimes there are Alzheimer's Australia have a course going, or Dementia Australia has a course going, or Diabetes Australia has a course going. Try to, if you see these things, and it's usually on flyers somewhere, if you belong to the union, they might send you some information through, oh, there's this course coming to Mackay. At the moment, a lot of courses are done through Zoom, which is not really that exciting. It's much more exciting to go and sit in a class and get fed by them, because normally they give you food as well when they come. But keep your eyes open and you know, keep yourself up to date. It's just the more courses you can do, the better, the more employable you will be for one, you know. I know that with disability, you do have to do the NDIS training if you're going to be working in disability. It's something that is required. But most companies actually make you do that when you go and apply for the job. They make you sit there and you get paid for it, for that hour. Yeah, very easy. I've just started. I haven't done it yet. I've enrolled and everything. I want to still do it. Oh, the COVID one, yeah.
That was tedious.
Yeah, and then of course the COVID one, we all have to do that at the moment. So yeah. So just keep your eyes open for any courses coming, you know, going around.
If we were doing a COVID course, and as you said before, we're in a position where you can't socially isolate from a client.
Yeah, they need to keep in mind that